Hey guys, this is Rurouni K95 here. Once again, it is time for a manga review video. Yes, we haven't done a simple manga review video in a while, which I haven't done in... Well, I think I have been reviewing the first... I think I read 4 of those Inuyasha manga volumes in the past months, I guess. Now you mentioned that. Today's manga review, we're going to be doing something that I haven't done before, even though I was a little bored and I haven't thought of something to do. Today's manga review, we're going to be doing a manga review on the 5th volume of Inuyasha as well. So let's begin here of how the story thus so far, basically. Yeah. So this is basically chapter 7. Even though we're getting to another chapter, like chapter 1 on this is basically the Spiderhead. It's where Inuyasha, Shippo, and Kagome were figuring out of what they saw something until something strange happening from out of nowhere. What you see in this chapter of the manga as well, in this manga first chapter as well. And also, it was basically somebody who almost fell into the water, but then until Inuyasha saves somebody's life after from falling. It was, yeah, actually, because she thought it was some human who saved her, but she knows that Inuyasha is basically a half dog demon, so she thought he was a demon, and then he caused her to slap Inuyasha, and Inuyasha fell into the water, especially in this chapter of the manga as well. If she could have understand, basically, if Inuyasha is in human form, but Kagome asks this other person does she even live in the mountain? But they saved her life because she thought it was some demon of how, if they could have understand, basically, ever since she has been living on the mountain since the spring, it was basically how they could understand of how they were going to get past to the mountain before sunset in this chapter part on here. Yeah, you can see us on that one here. And for whatever the part is that Kagome told Inuyasha that there's demons killing people, basically. Of how if Inuyasha could fight off the demons to make for the sake, he never fights demons for the sake of mortals, what he told Kagome. Of how he could have figured out until they noticed something. Some building on top of the mountain. It must be the temple in this chapter. Take notice on this one here. From what I understand as well, it was not Nazuna who was the master of this temple. Of how he must been this girl's master as well. How they could fight off those demons, basically how if they want to know, how they want to explain about what the Spiderhead, of how there was about the terror for demons, was how that he said that he shielded the temple, that no demons may enter unbidden, was what he said in this part. If you did take notice on this. Yeah. Of how they want to know if he is a blind monk, if he's human particularly, how they want to know something weird happening, basically. Of how there were mortals, of how the demons were in this manga. Like, there was something until there's something on top of the ceiling in the temple from out of nowhere, what they noticed as well. And also, there are those human-like heads on those bodies of a spider, which cause those types of monster-like demons, which is causing terror in this one. And Inuyasha could have figured out if he could fight off those with his sword, if the sword looks dull as well, but how so Shippo could use the foxfire to kill off those spider-looking demons, basically. Until something happened, what caused Inuyasha's hair, which made him become a human form when his hair turns black. Yeah, you see this one. In Chapter 2, in the New Moon as well, meanwhile, something happened in the temple. Something happened to Nazuna, who is always captured by those spider demons with those cobwebs everywhere, until this girl noticed something in the temple. Meanwhile, Kagome explained to Inuyasha, especially of how something happened, because Inuyasha said he has no claws and no fangs, since he's in his human form, particularly of how they could figure out as how something, particularly, if there is no one to judge him as well, particularly, as how he could know if he could understand, basically, for how this happens as well. And if he could have realized if he's either a half-demon or a human, and because he's in his human form. And, yeah, Nazuna's basically fine, but something happened to the blind monk who's in the temple, basically. She was told, Kagome, that he's still alive. I mean, how Inuyasha refused because he's in the human form, of how they could figure out if he would fight off the demons or not, until something happened in the temple. Like something really suspicious happening in this chapter, what you see here. Come to think of it, is how the curse goes, happening in the carnage of what they noticed in the temple, until he sets those fire, what he sees in the light. It was those spider-like demon creatures with heads of the humans, what you see in that one, until Inuyasha could fight off. If there was for those shards, basically. And then he found the backpack, what he noticed as how. Yeah, the blind monk was been hostage, because they thought he was dead, but he used all the powers to protect the mountain, of how it's under risky thing, how it goes. Yeah, and if he could have understand if he was still alive, like, until something caught Inuyasha in the neck under the spider's web. Yeah, in Chapter 3, the spider's web progresses how something happened with, which causes, it was basically how it causes the monk to be possessed by some spider demon monster when Inuyasha realized something has possessed this monk as well. Especially his body. Well, they found out it was a spider's web in his body. His body is like how it goes when something, how it happens, basically, for what you noticed in this part of the manga as well. You know, because when Inuyasha has to fight off those, basically, how to fight off the demon, so it's basically, it almost bit Inuyasha, basically. But Kagome could figure out if she could understand as how her backpack is in there, but she doesn't know if Inuyasha has the shards. So Inuyasha could fight off but it was something bit Inuyasha, especially how Kagome could have realized if Inuyasha's either alive or dead, but all of this goes. So she has to fight off the monster, but she found Inuyasha's sword, so the Steel Claws Aurora is in this. So she has to fight off those monster demons that look like spiders. She realized that Inuyasha is still alive, basically, if she could fight off the monster as well, which is happening in the temple, basically, for the Aurora. So she had realized if Inuyasha is unconscious, or if he could fight off the venom after the spider demon monster, which the monk turns out to be, of how his revelations as how that Kagome could figure out if Inuyasha almost could have died as well, but then they had to fight off the monster as well in this temple, especially what they could figure out if they could understand until the next day comes, particularly of how she could figure if Inuyasha felt better until he could have realized of how this something happened. Nazuna finds out that her master, which is the blind monk, who is actually a demon in disguise. Quite frankly, no wonder why there's disguises as well as how how this basically it was enough that Nazuna's master was being possessed, as how possession goes, as how they could figure it out. So they had to realize of how her memories, how she remembered when he was protecting the mountains as well. Quite frankly, because that's how it is. Until something strange happened, and then it was all along. So Inuyasha is lucky to be alive in this part. Yeah. So he had to tries to fight off the demon spider monster as well. But till Inuyasha realized that he came back to his half-demon form, Chapter 5, the Demon Reborn. When Inuyasha reverts to his half-demon form from his human form, so he has to fight off the monster in this part, when he uses the Claw of Exorcism, particularly what you noticed. Yeah, because that's a good way to fight off evil in this part. So he is back in his half-demon form, basically. And then how Inuyasha wants to get those Shikon jewel shards to fight off this monster who is possessing this blind master monk person. Until he has to fight off those demon-like monsters in this part. What you notice, take a look on that. And for the thing is that how something happening when the chaos continues, it grabs the girl, particularly when Inuyasha tries to save Nazuna from those monsters, including those, but they were captured in those that look like cobwebs-like looking hair, which is being captured in this part, what you notice as well. And also for the thing is that there is how this happened goes of how there were spider demons that were on the mountain. If they realized that they knew it all happened, so Nazuna has to fight off. But she tried basically of how she could fight off those. So Inuyasha has to deal with in chapter 6 of this manga, in this 5th volume of the manga. So he has to fight off the evil, basically, in this chapter part, is how Inuyasha has to do when he has to fight off this monster-like spider demon, which possesses the blind monk, which is Nazuna's master. But if he would have realized if it was him in disguise, a demon in disguise, or if he was being possessed as well. So he has to use, basically, the Tetsaiga. So he tells Nazuna to don't move an inch. What you notice, what you see here as well. In this part of this chapter, so he has to fight off the demon just to save Nazuna's life, which eventually almost could have killed the monster, basically, with it. But then his Tetsaiga reels could reveal, and he found it was basically the Shikon shards, which they fused inside the demon's body, quite frankly. So that eventually, how they realized of how they could have understand if something happened as well. In chapter 7, when Inuyasha was looking back of how he would have realized something shot him in an arrow to the tree, which is into an entrapment spell, he could have realized if it was Kagome, but it wasn't. It was Kikyo in this chapter, because she pinned Inuyasha to a tree with an arrow, the bow and arrow. But it woke up. It was actually his nightmare, because he found out it was a dream. Until he has something happened that bring back his bad memories, which things don't go right. But then Inuyasha could have realized that Kagome has slapped Inuyasha because she thought it was an evil demon, but it was actually her nightmare for mistaken for how this happened, what you see in that one. Yeah. So for the thing, time goes by as well until some witch-looking demon with a sight on there, which is the smell of blood, clings to like a cloud, and the blood scent. When Inuyasha and Kagome could figure out something happening in the town, something happened to Lady Kaede, of how that she's still alive, except that she has the blind patch as well. Something in the shrine area, so on the blood on somebody, when they noticed something basically of how it was in the desecrated shrine, and then they found Kikyo's body remains from her grave as well. When the night, that's how it was until the night come, until the ogress named Urasu came for the ashes of Kikyo's bones, because they figured out of how something evil has arrived, particularly in this chapter of the manga, as how this progresses. If they could have, they're sworn enemies, especially when Inuyasha didn't want to get involved, because he wanted to tell Miyoga about who is the demon Urasu, whatever, who, if you want to pronounce the name, about something goes wrong, basically, who's coming for the bones of Kikyo from her grave. Especially of how, when Kagome wanted to know something, how very wrong is going on. Especially of how it could have ever happened between of how this could have figured out something, how something really wrong could happen. When Lady Kaede could fall out about the bones of Kikyo has been taken from the grave, because something in danger evil has arrived. Meanwhile, Urasu has finally wanted to resurrect Kikyo from the grave. In chapter 8 of this manga, when they could have figured out about how Kagome would have figured out if Inuyasha was in love with Kikyo, especially of how ever since Inuyasha has been trapped by Kikyo's arrow magically for 50 years, of how he knows about the scent of the demon, particularly. If they could understand, if they wanted to follow something into Demon Urasu's domain, of how you noticed in this chapter, if you can take note on this as well, from what I understand as well. Yeah. When Demon Urasu has finally found the earth and bones about how she could wanted to bring Kikyo back from the dead, especially because, and how when something cracked, it was the body of Kikyo, particularly, especially ever since Kikyo died from the very beginning, when she wanted to make Kikyo stand, but her body fell. It was motionless, of how something got to this as well. Despite that Kikyo has been dead since from the first time. I mean, this is not exactly what the first time how this happened, until something go on when they noticed that something is coming as well, like it's coming to get those as well. Until Inuyasha defeated the ogre's troops with the claws of steel, especially what you see in this one, if you want to take note on this as well, particularly in this chapter of the manga as well. Quite frankly, is that when something how it was until the arrival appears, between the battle between Inuyasha and Urasu, whatever, until she captured Kagome, particularly. Inuyasha could have figured out about how there's something weird of how it was basically the water, the smells of herbs, making Kagome uh, 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 creeped out about how this happens until Kikyo appeared. If she could have known if Kagome is the reincarnation of Kikyo as well, particularly of how this goes. In chapter 9 in this manga, Inuyasha could have realized after the bridge was destroyed and Lady Kaede along with Shippo appeared, particularly of how Inuyasha has realized that Kagome has been kidnapped as well. It's something of how if he could have understand if Kagome is the reincarnation of Kikyo, because of how he truly what he knows of what had happened. And Kagome was paralyzed after she's been kidnapped. Especially just so Demon Urasu wanted to reincarnate Kikyo, particularly in this chapter. Especially of how if there's going to explain until the shard of jewels as well, the Shikon jewel shards as well. Until something how it's a shield around a casket around Kagome particularly, but that wasn't until Inuyasha appeared. Of how he remembers of something, of how he had a sixth sense about how he remembered he was with Kikyo in the time, particularly about the moments of how they were, if they were never stood so close together, especially between Kikyo and Inuyasha, particularly, you noticed in that one as well. From how this thing goes as well, of how she looks human when she told Inuyasha, especially in this chapter, her as well. When Inuyasha and Lady Kaede were getting closer to how they're on the roads as well, of how they could have figured out as how what he remembered as well, when Inuyasha remembered from the beginning of how he ought to take those Shikon jewel shards. If Inuyasha could realize of something how it happened, of how Kagome's been trapped in the shield of a casket ever since when Inuyasha arrived, because he realized that Kagome's been kidnapped ever since the reincarnation of Kikyo appeared, especially the voice. And Inuyasha realized it was Kikyo. So Inuyasha realized that something happened to Kagome, especially of how her soul came into something weird happened, especially into the proper form of Kikyo, especially in this chapter of how this progresses as well. And the thing is that when Kagome's body is unconscious and she's been knocked out, especially Kagome's soul is in Kikyo's body as well, because she's been reincarnated as well, particularly of how after this basically how, because she realized that it was particularly Demon Urasu has dragged Kikyo into this, especially in this chapter of what you see in this one as well. From what I understand is that how the story progresses, because she could have realized that she realized it was Inuyasha, of how from the very beginning as well, because Inuyasha realizes it was the betrayal on Kikyo as well, until something of how when Kikyo has started to attack Inuyasha, it was basically the betrayal of how this progresses, of how it has got to him as well, especially of what you see in this chapter as well. Very harsh, as crazy as hell, how nothing goes right of how this happens. As for the thing is that of how wanted the jewel shards, especially of how something really happens when Kikyo wanted to kill Inuyasha, but Inuyasha survived. And this part where it relates at the end, where it leads you to volume 6 of the original manga. So that's the story in volume 5 of Inuyasha, of how I'm giving my big analysis of what I'm learning from this when it comes to rereading the manga, because there is a lot of analysis. So I can do like 1 to 5 manga analysis on Inuyasha. When it comes to talking about the original Inuyasha manga, the biggest thing is that it's how it's almost goes something not in a wrong way of how you want to know. I know there is the toxic hatred, between the hatred, Kikyo fans hate Kagome and the Kagome fans hate Kikyo, which has gotten way out of hand. Although I have nothing to do with the hatred of either Kikyo or Kagome, but I'm just gonna say things just don't go well, basically, of what you noticed. It's like if you rub something in the wrong way as well, of how the story is great, and this goes into the little progresses of how this goes. Yeah, the story is going into a little serious type of way. We all know the characters are being included in this one as well, especially for a story like this. But for overall, I highly recommend to read this one as well. If you ever going into some manga recommendations as well, from how I learned as well. When it comes to reviewing a manga for a typical manga review video, is how something is the biggest thing is how you want to do something of how you wanted to do a video as how you're going to give it in some in-depths as well, because we're at this part where it leads you to be continued part on the 5th volume of Inuyasha. This leads you to volume 6 of the manga, which I'll be doing a review on it the manga tomorrow, basically. I mean, there's a lot of analysis going on. One of these days I might do manga analysis on Inuyasha, especially where I'm going to talk about the analysis for the manga especially as well. When it comes to revisiting Inuyasha, the biggest thing is how I'm going to do this as well. Yeah, my score for this manga, a 10 out of 10 as well. So that's going to be it for my manga review on reviewing Inuyasha Volume 5 for today's manga review for today. Thank you for watching, but before we go, here's what I'm going to say for this one. This is a good, proper way. It's gotten to a point, even though I have been reviewing the first 4 volumes of the Inuyasha manga in the past year, I guess, months, back in 2021. This is the first time I'm going to do a manga review for this time as well, which it'll definitely take the cake when it comes to reviewing a classic manga from legendary Rumiko Takahashi, who is known for her works such as Rama One Half, Meizan Ikoku, Yurusei Yatsura, many of her famous works as well. Because you get the point, because you know what I mean as well. Hope subscribe for content, my anime planet link in the description down below. You share this video on your Twitter, Facebook. If you have a Twitter and Facebook account, and all the social media, smack the like button if you enjoyed this video. What are your thoughts in the comment section below? Let me know if you like about your opinion and your thoughts about the 5th volume of the Inuyasha manga. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as well. And also, if you want to check out my anime planet, link will be in the description if you want to check it out as well. And that's all I got. So keep it otaku for this manga review on the 5th volume of Inuyasha, because this is the first time I wanted to do a manga review on the 5th volume of Inuyasha for the first time as well. This is Rurouni K95 saying thank you for watching my video, and I'm glad you liked it. I hope you enjoy it. Hope to see you soon for the next video, and I hope you have a great day. This is Rurouni K95 signing off, and thank you for watching my video, and I will see you soon for more videos.